Okay. The last four kings were very wicked. If you notice, they had two names, all right? Sometimes the Egyptians, if they liked them, they would change their name to an Egyptian name and so on. So this was the son of Josiah. The last four sons were very evil. They did not share their fathers and their grandfathers. There was one that was a grandson. The others were sons. Love and commitment to God, so judgment was hastened. You have to know that they did not have a Jewish mother that taught them. Following his death, Egypt laid claim to the land. Remember, it was the Egyptian king that went north and took over the land that was finally being held by the Assyrians. But after Josiah died in battle, Egypt laid claim to the land. Somebody was asking me a few minutes ago, and a couple of people, and it's a good question. I mean, do you call it Palestine? Do you call it Canaan? Do you call it Israel? We call it Israel today. It depends on the time that it was. And there are Arab peoples in the Middle East today who still call it Palestine. They will not call it Israel. In fact, Jordan and some of the nations round about will not have, on their maps, they do not have Israel at all. They have Palestine. They will not recognize that Israel owns that land. All right. But when they first came in, it was Canaan, because the Canaanites dwelt there. Then they called it Palestine because of the Philistines that were in the land, in the southern part of the land. So it was interchangeable. It is Israel. And it was Israel and Judah during the time that we're studying the divided kingdoms. Remember that. Okay. Jehoaz or Shalom. Following his death, Egypt laid claim to the land, and Jehoiakim, Eliakim, older son, favored Egyptian rule, so was not allowed to rule. A strong anti-Egyptian party placed the younger son, Jehoaz, on Judah's throne. 3 months later, the Pharaoh jailed him in Egypt, where he died. Judah was commanded to pay a heavy tribute, and the older son, Jehoiakim, was named king. Right? The reign of Jehoiakim, his name means, if you notice, all of these wicked kings were also, they had Jehovah, or they had God's name added to their name, which should not have been. Look at all of the prophets that came on the scene at that time. He was the older son, 25 years old, ruled 11 years, and that was, I think another one ruled 11 years, but the others ruled a very short time. His reign was very evil. You imagine the reform that they had under his father. The people, again, were encouraged to build high places after their father had torn down all of the high places and everything that had been there since the days of Solomon. Heavy demands were made upon the people, so the poor became slaves to the wicked. Jeremiah began to warn of coming judgment while false prophets assured of God's favor. False prophets always assure of God's favor. And the king destroyed a scroll of Jeremiah, and we will talk about that when we get into the life of Jeremiah. Before we start talking about Babylon taking over, let's look at the map. Here is the city of Babylon, which is the capital city. This was called Babylonia, and they took over all of the Syrians. Assyria was no more, because Babylon became the world empire, ruling all of the Mediterranean area. And they were wealthy, very wealthy, had good land and everything that was washed down through the rains. And they had storage, bread or grain stored that would feed the people for 20 years. When they were finally taken over by Medo-Persia. This is Persia here. It's Iran today, and this is Iraq today. All right. So you can see where these nations are. What was the first world empire? Egypt. Okay. World, and we're talking about that ruled pretty much of the world. That is the world at that time, the Mediterranean world. And then from Egypt, what was the next world empire? Assyria. Okay. As you study not only the Old Testament, but as you study the interbiblical period, as you study prophecy, all of these are important that you get these nations lined up, because the prophets were talking about all these nations, especially Daniel. We'll probably spend a whole week, or not a whole week, but a whole night, maybe 2 nights on Daniel. It's very important. I do have a course on Daniel that I taught several years ago on video that I will not be teaching again. But we will pretty well cover, we will go through it pretty fast. The prophecy part of Daniel and the historical part, because part of it is history and part of it is prophecy. So, and then the next world empire would be Babylon, and they would take the Jews into captivity. Assyria, what did Assyria do with the people that they captured? Pardon?
Tortured.
Killed them and tortured them?
Yeah, and scattered them. That is why God did not allow the Jews, the southern kingdom, to be taken by Assyrians. He didn't want them scattered. They were taken down in Babylon, and there they helped to dig the canals for irrigation for the Babylonians, and they had their own camping ground. They had their own territory where they lived. And this is where Ezekiel was their teacher and their prophet to them. And Daniel and, of course, some of the other princes were living in the palace with Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel was highly respected by the kings of that day. Jerusalem likely would not have been destroyed if, because of Daniel, if they had not resisted the Babylonians. That's the reason why we'll be talking about Jeremiah, that Jeremiah pleaded with them, the people. Surrender to the Babylonians, because life was not real difficult in Babylon. They had their own area to live, and some people became so wealthy in business that when they came time for them to go home in 70 years, they didn't want to go because they were prospering there in Persia, and because the Medo-Persians took over from the Babylonians. And then from there, the Greeks took over, and then the Romans. And when we get into Daniel, you'll see charts of all of these nations, which will begin to make a lot of sense. Why it's important that you know who these empires were, one after another. You cannot understand the book of Revelation if you don't understand this period of the interbiblical period, or the empires of the world, because John talks about them as well as Daniel talks about them. Okay, within 3 years, Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon claimed Assyrian territory of Egypt and Palestine, and when Jehoiakim refused to send heavy tribute, he attacked Jerusalem and took 3,000 of the royal family to Babylon. The kings liked to take the educated, the royalty, and so on, that would be an asset to their kingdoms. In fact, when they took Daniel and the princes from of Judah into Babylon, they immediately took them to the palace where Nebuchadnezzar was, and they began to train them in all of the education, the ways of Babylon. They changed their names, they changed their dress, they tried to change them completely. But it is so thrilling to see that these were all young guys, probably teenagers. It's believed that Daniel wasn't over 16 years of age. But he was so strong that he never wavered in offending God, no matter what was offered to him. He had a wisdom where he could approach them not that would offend them, of eating their food. They offered them delicacies that had been offered to idols, and they couldn't eat that. And instead of saying, well, I couldn't eat that stuff, it's offered to idols. No. He said to them in a positive way, would we have permission to eat vegetables and bread? Of course. And when the time was up and they appeared before the king, they were the healthy ones. So they got the promotions. But they had a lot of temptation in that. But no king, even Babylonian or Persian king, always praised Daniel. And he lived to be over 100 years old and had great promotions. So his story is one that I think every young person should study the life of Daniel. If you want to talk about a character, that was a character. Daniel is one that you could hold up as being like Joseph, almost a perfect person, in a sense, that you don't see any of the warts or any of the things that were wrong in his life. Wonderful guy. Okay. Where am I? Jerusalem took 3,000 of the royal family to Babylon. Among them was Daniel. Another attack would come 8 and 9 years later, and when the other attack came, they took not the royalty, they took them before, except the people who were ruling. But they began to take the priests. They began to take the highly educated people. And Ezekiel was among the second of the captives that were taken. All right? Prisoners were taken 3 times. And we will have charts that will show you maybe next week. On the 3rd, that's the reason there's so many repeats back and forth to get it all straightened out in your mind. I think you have to go over it more than one time. On the 3rd attempt, or on the 3rd time that they came to take people, Jerusalem would be destroyed. And this is when Ezekiel was ministering to the people there, and he was like Jeremiah. He was doing things to demonstrate what was happening in Jerusalem. Take for instance, when Jerusalem was destroyed, God said, "Your wife is going to die on the day that Jerusalem will be destroyed, and you are not to mourn over her, because I don't want the people in Babylon mourning over the destruction of Jerusalem." But Jeremiah begged that they would not resist Babylon, because God knew that he's taking them out really to save them. They became so evil. And when we get into Ezekiel, you will see that possibly next week. We're going to read some of those scriptures where God had to leave the temple because of the wickedness. He couldn't stay there any longer. And when God left the temple, then that gave Nebuchadnezzar, it gave him permission that he could come in and destroy all of the buildings. And Jesus said, like the Romans did the same thing, and Jesus said to the disciples, "One of these days there will not be one stone left on another." And now it's the same thing happened with Nebuchadnezzar. So Jerusalem was completely destroyed 2 times. And they stole all of their gold and their silver, and they took the precious vessels out of the temple. down to Babylon. But because Daniel had so much favor in Babylon, you see Nebuchadnezzar came in 2 times and he didn't touch the city. He just took captives. And the 3rd time, they so resisted, they locked themselves into the temple, and many died in the fires that locked themselves into the temple, just like they did in the days when Titus came in at 70 A.D. Jehoiakim was slain outside Jerusalem's gates during the attack because he had destroyed Jeremiah's scroll. Jeremiah, the prophets in those days had a secretary, and as they would speak the word of the Lord, the secretary would write down what they were saying. And Jeremiah's word was taken. They took the scroll that Jeremiah had separated himself and had written, and some of the people were so concerned that they said, "This guy is a prophet, and I think the king should know what the prophet has said in his scroll." And the king just took a penknife and cut it all up. And so God said for that he would be under his judgment. And so he was unmourned, he was cast out like an animal. The golden consecrated vessels of God were taken and placed in an idol temple down in Babylon. And Jehoiakim's son, took the throne. All right? Well, here we are. Jehoiachin, okay. Zedekiah also reigned 11 years. This one reigned 3 years, this one 3 years. 2 of them reigned 11 years. He was the last one when Jerusalem was destroyed. The reign of Jehoiakim. Prophets were the same as when the father ruled. There were a lot of prophets still trying to turn the people back to God. He was the son of Jehoiakim and grandson of Josiah. He was bad, but the best of the last 4 kings. Chronicles said he was 8 years old. This was certainly a translator's error, for he had many wives. He maybe 28, we don't know. But anyhow, he was not 8 years old. I doubt that it was in the Hebrew writings. It was probably a translator's mistake when it's translated into Greek. After 3 months on the throne, Babylon attacked Jerusalem, taking the king, his wives, his household, and 10,000 captives, which included princes, soldiers, craftsmen, smiths, and religious leaders. Ezekiel was among them. Ezekiel was born to be a priest. Priests, all of their lives, they were separated unto the Word of God. They practically, when you study typology, or when you study the offerings and the types in the temple and in the tabernacle, these men had to be very bright. They had to memorize Leviticus. They had to memorize because if they should make a mistake, it would mean their death. So they had to be bright. They had to be as perfect as a man could be. And here, when he was 30 years old, instead of serving in the temple as a priest, he was taken down in Babylonian captivity. Fascinating book. It's pretty well, when you get over to chapter 9, it's pretty well in chronological order that we will go through and show you when we get to Ezekiel. They left mainly the poor. They didn't want the poor. Assyria did the same thing in the north, if you remember. They left the poor, the aged, the unskilled, people who were lazy. They left them because they wanted to take people who would benefit their kingdom. They took royal treasures. They cut apart the golden bowls from Solomon's reign. And the king was treated well in Babylon, likely again because of Daniel. And if they had not resisted, more than likely Jerusalem never would have been destroyed. It was the same thing with what is the Jewish historian. What's his name? Josephus. Josephus did the same thing in the Roman days. He was almost like a Jeremiah. He begged the people. He even lived in Rome a lot. He asked the people not to resist Rome, and they called him a traitor. They called Jeremiah a traitor as well, because he said, surrender to the Babylonians, because God had made him to know that they would only be there for a time when he could work a new spirit into them, bring them back, and they would be a different people. He had to take them away from all the idols. And when they went to Babylon, everywhere they looked, there were idol temples. It was almost like they got sick of it. I mean, in the land, and they missed the worship of God. They missed the temple. They missed all that they had had before. And when they looked out on the city of Babylon, there were hundreds of altars and shrines and buildings dedicated to the gods of Babylon. And some of these were actually covered with gold and precious stones. And they got sick of all of it. And Ezekiel taught them, and they met for prayer, they met for the reading of the word, met for fellowship, much like the New Testament church. This is when synagogue worship came into being. When they did come back, they did build a temple. But it was never the same as it was before, because the Shekinah glory was not there anymore. He left when just after, when these kings were ruling, and Judah was just going down, down, down. God left the temple at that time, never to come back in the same way again. Prophets were the same as when the father ruled. He was the son of Jehoiakim and the grandson of Josiah. He was bad. I've already read that though. The reign of Zedekiah. His righteousness of Jehovah was the meaning of his name. Look at all the prophets. Habakkuk, Jeremiah, Obadiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel in Babylon. Younger son of Josiah, 21 years old. He was approved by the Babylonians. The people who were ruling approved them and put them on the throne. But they were to do exactly what either Egypt or Babylon wanted them to do. He ruled 11 years, stubborn and weak and dominated by his own officials. He led the nation into deeper sin. Jeremiah and other prophets warned, but were mocked, punished. They tried to kill Jeremiah, in fact, and Jeremiah's life was threatened. Ezekiel in Babylon was carried into the spirit to view Jerusalem's great apostasy and abominations. After God would leave the city, destruction would come. We will read parts of Ezekiel a little bit later on, not tonight. Zedekiah promised loyalty to Babylon in the beginning, but the powerful pro-Egyptian party, Egypt was very powerful at that time, persuaded him to turn to Egypt for help. And the prophets always told him, don't turn to the nations, because it's like a covenant of death if you turn to a pagan nation for help. Jeremiah asked them to yield peacefully to Babylon, for to resist meant greater suffering and destruction. Zedekiah joined a revolt led by Ammon and Tyre. So Nebuchadnezzar attacked the city of Jerusalem, and Egypt came, and Babylon withdrew temporarily to attack Egypt and win. Jerusalem was shut up more than 2 years. Moses had foretold the scene of starvation and disease that gripped the city. This happened 2 times in Judah's history. It happened also in Samaria in Israel. Deuteronomy 28:57. You want to read that? And Paul, I want you to read some of Lamentations in a few minutes. This is what Moses had prophesied.
And toward her young, one that cometh out from between her feet, and toward her children, which she shall bear, for she shall eat them for want of all things secretly in the siege and straitness wherewith thine enemy shall distress thee in thy gates.
Okay. The king of Babylon finally came into Jerusalem, destroying the temple buildings. The walls and the bronze pillars were broken. Babylonians carried away the precious vessels, and the temple was stripped of its precious metals. Zedekiah, his sons, and some of his men escaped through a hole in the wall, but were captured and put on trial. His sons were blinded and some were slain, including the chief priest, the guards, and the counselors. Many others were imprisoned. The aftermath. What is happening? Lamentation was written by Jeremiah. Jeremiah was called the weeping prophet because there was nothing he could do but just cry to God to save his people and his nation. And God finally said, don't pray anymore because they've sealed their doom. They must leave. They must go into Babylonian captivity. And after all the fighting was over, the walls were knocked down, all of the precious vessels were taken, 1/3 of the people were killed, 1/3 of them was taken into Babylonian captivity. 1/3 were killed outside the walls, 1/3 was killed inside the walls, as we will find out when we get into Ezekiel next week. And Jeremiah was promised by the Babylonian king that he did not have to go into captivity, that he could stay in the land if he would like. And historians tells us that Jeremiah, and by his readings you can tell, he sat in the ashes of Jerusalem that had been burned and destroyed. He sat in the ashes weeping. And he wrote the book of Lamentations. That is his book. It is called the funeral dirge over the city of Jerusalem. And so, but he wrote about the destruction, but then he wrote about how God's mercies endure. God's mercies will always, God is faithful. In other words, this city has died, but it's going to come back. Many of the people have died, but God will rebuild the land again. Read the Lamentation scriptures, if you will.
How lonely sits the city that was full of people. How like a widow is she, who was great among the nations. The princes among the provinces has become a slave. She weeps bitterly in the night. Her tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers she has none to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They have become her enemies. Judah has gone into captivity, under affliction and hard servitude. She dwells among the nations. She finds no rest. All her persecutors overtake her in dire straits. The roads to Zion mourn because no one comes to set the feast. All her gates are desolate. Her priests sigh. Her virgins are afflicted, and she is in bitterness. Her adversaries have become her master. Her enemies prosper. For the Lord has afflicted her because of the multitude of her transgressions. Her children have gone into captivity before the enemy, and from the daughter of Zion all her splendor is departed. Her princes have become like deer that find no pasture, that flee without strength before the pursuer. In the days of her affliction and roaming, Jerusalem remembers all her pleasant things that she had in the days of old, when her people fell into the hands of her enemy. With no one to help her, the adversaries saw her and mocked at her downfall. Jerusalem has sinned gravely, therefore she has become vile. All who honored her despise her because they have seen her nakedness. Yes, she sighs and turns away. Her uncleanness is in her skirts. She did not consider her destiny. Therefore her collapse was awesome. She had no comforter. O Lord, behold my affliction, for the enemy is exalted. The adversary has spread his hand over all her pleasant things, for she has seen the nations enter her sanctuary, those whom you commanded not to enter your assembly. All her people sigh, they seek bread. They have been given their valuables for food to restore life. See, O Lord, and consider, for I am scorned.
Would you give them that scripture that you read?
That's Lamentations 1, 1 through 11.
Lamentations 1, 1 through 11,
And this is 2, 5 through 10.
2, 5 through 10, if you want to put that in your notes.
The Lord was like an enemy. He has swallowed up Israel. He has swallowed up all her palaces. He has destroyed her strongholds. It has increased mourning and lamentation in the daughter of Judah. He has done violence to his tabernacle. As if it were a garden, he has destroyed his place of assembly. The Lord has caused the appointed feasts and Sabbaths to be forgotten in Zion. In his burning indignation, he has spurned the king and the priest. The Lord has spurned his altar. He has abandoned his sanctuary. He has given up the walls of her palaces into the hands of her enemies. They have made a noise in the house of the Lord, as on the day of a set feast. The Lord has purposed to destroy the wall of the daughter of Zion. He has stretched out a line. He has not withdrawn his hand from destroying. Therefore he has caused the rampart and the wall to lament. They languish together. Her gates have sunk into the ground. He has destroyed and broken her bars. Her kings and her princes are among the nations. The law is no more. And her prophets find no vision from the Lord. The elders of the daughter of Zion sit on the ground and keep silence. They throw dust on their heads and gird themselves with sackcloth. The virgins of Jerusalem bow their heads to the ground.
Lamentations 3,
Verses 3, 19 through 26.
that's one of my favorite parts of Lamentations, okay.
Remember my affliction in roaming, the wormwood and the gall. My soul still remembers and sinks within me. This I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. Through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed, because his compassions will fail not. They are new every morning.
I'll read that one again.
Through the Lord's mercies.
It's good for us, that is a word for us today, I feel. That word was given to me one time, and it's very precious to me. Read that again, Paul.
This I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. Through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning, great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul, therefore I have hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. It is good that one should hope and wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord.
Okay, see, the Lord never leaves us without hope. And every prophet that we have studied so far tells you that. They learned of their doom, the judgment of God on them, but there was always going to be hope. Most of the people left Judah were taken captive. 1/3 of them. The poor, the aged, the ill, the educated were left. And a young man was appointed governor, Gedaliah, and he was appointed by the Babylonians. Jeremiah decided that he is going to stay with what the prophets said were rotten figs. That's how he referred to them as being people that were not much good, the people in the land. This is exciting to see, even among those that were considered rotted fruit, God gave them a promise if they would only obey him. And Jeremiah met with the people. He stayed behind with the people. And he met with them, and of course, there was a young man that rose up, and he killed the governor, and he frightened the people. What will Babylon come and really take us to be part of the conspiracy. And next day, 80 men came from Shechem, Samaria, and Shiloh to worship, and they were shaven, had torn clothes, and cut themselves. And this young man that had done this, Ishmael, pretended to mourn when he met with them. But he led them to the scene of the massacre, and he slew all but 10 of them and threw their bodies in a large cistern. 10 were convinced him that they would bring treasures to him. All were placed under the governor's care, were captured by Ishmael, this conspirator. When the rebel leader headed for Ammon, other leaders, Johanan and others, set out to stop him, but failed. He escaped into Ammon. Johanan gathered the people together near Bethlehem, fearing the Babylonian anger, and so they said, let's go down to Egypt to be safe from the Babylonians. They came to Jeremiah and they asked him to pray for them. And he prayed for them, and they said, we want to go to Babylon or to Egypt. And he said, don't go to Egypt. If you go to Egypt, you're going to be destroyed. And they claimed he was a false prophet, and they went into Egypt. And Nebuchadnezzar went down into Egypt, and all of them died, but eventually. And Jeremiah went with them into Egypt. We know that. God had promised them, if you will stay in the land, you will never again be driven off of this land. If you will only obey me. That was a promise of God. And they said, Jeremiah doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a false prophet. So they went into Egypt. He went with them. And Jeremiah tells us in his book that they again began to worship idols, or they began to worship the bull down in Egypt again, these people that had suffered and learned, supposedly had learned so much. So in Egypt, God spoke to Jeremiah, for the people had begun to worship the gods of Egypt. And Jeremiah called all the Jews together in Egypt, and he said, God is angry. If they did not return to the land, they would all die. And the idolaters accused Jeremiah of being a liar and a false prophet. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And they claimed that the worship of God had only brought them trouble. And before long, Nebuchadnezzar swept down into Egypt, and all of them lost their lives. We don't know what happened to Jeremiah, if he died a natural death, if he was killed or anything, but he did not live a long life. Okay, any questions? We do have about 5 minutes that we could take for questions, and then we're going to watch a really good video. Anybody have anything? Okay, yes.
When was the last time that the Ark of the Covenant was seen in Jerusalem? Under what king?
Pardon me?
The last time the Ark of the Covenant was seen in Jerusalem, under what king was that?
Probably it was taken when they took the golden vessel. Now, I'm glad you brought that up. We don't know if he took the Ark of the Covenant or not. Because in the book of the Maccabees, that was written, about 150 BC, it says that the Ark of the Covenant was taken across the Jordan River and hidden. The facts in the book of Maccabees, which is the historical books, seems to be pretty accurate. And we hear so much today, they found it in a cave. They haven't. I personally believe that they never will find it. You know why I believe they'll never find? I'll be surprised if they do, because a lot of people, like they worshipped that thing on a pole.
The bronze
Remember? I think they would again worship the ark, that box, and I believe that it's not been found. some archaeologists that want to make a name for themselves said it's been found. It's not been found. But I doubt that that was taken. They took all of the vessels that were left in the temple, but I imagine that after that first attack on Jerusalem, that some of the Levites and priests might have taken that ark and have hidden it somewhere, and probably it'll be hidden forever. Okay?
Will it ever come? Do you think you'll ever be seen again?
I doubt it. I personally doubt that it will. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to see the video. About 25 minutes. It's really good, so.
What is it? What's the name of it?
It'll come on the screen.
Israel, one of the most ancient yet technically advanced
Turn
and
the sound
smallest
up.
nations in the world. Day after day getting more than her share of headlines on the front pages of the newspapers of the world. Yet still waiting, edging ever closer to her predicted destiny at the crossroads of eternity on this day of discovery.
Few nations of the world ignite as much international controversy. Few people groups, whether in or out of their ancestral homeland, have a history as provocative as the Jewish people. Western Wall Plaza, up above the Muslim Dome of the Rock, sitting in the holiest of Jewish sites, all of which amount to the most contested piece of real estate on earth. When you think about it, nobody unites and divides us like the nation of Israel. Israel gave us the protective laws and moral guidance of the Ten Commandments, the comforting words of the 23rd Psalm. And from the Jewish family tree came Jesus, who taught us not only to love one another, but our enemies as well. But Israel also gave us social and political problems. Problems that divide us in national elections and family gatherings. Even Jesus, the Jewish son who died acknowledging that he was the long-awaited Jewish Messiah, was known to have told his disciples, "Don't think that I have come to bring peace, but a sword." Yes, Israel does unite and divide us. She tells a timeless story about nations and about ourselves. And that's one reason Israel can't be ignored, because she gives us a history, a story, and a future that was all foretold by Jewish prophets.
Behold, I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that causes reeling to all the peoples around. It will come about in that day that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will be severely injured, and all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it. Zechariah chapter 12.
According to the Bible, Israel would not only be a source of conflict, but a means by which God would reveal himself to the world. A promise that was first made to Abraham.
I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Genesis chapter 12.
People from all over the world come to Israel. Whether loved or hated, Israel is a magnet. She attracts immigrants and journalists and heads of state, along with millions of Jewish, Muslim, and Christian people, all pulled to this land by their faith and by the faith of their fathers. I met with Ronnie, one of our Jewish guides, in a more modern section of Jerusalem on Ben Yehuda Street. We met to talk about who these people are that are so drawn to this land. Ronnie, Ben Yehuda has a whole different feel than the old city. Why is that?
First of all, because we are not anymore within the city walls. We're in the modern city of Jerusalem, even though this neighborhood is 120 years old.
120.
Yes, this is the third neighborhood of Jerusalem built outside the city walls.
How far are we from the old city?
We're about a 15-20 minutes walk, easy
You
walk,
can walk it then.
to the old city, yes.
All right. How do you explain the attraction? Why do people come here?
Well, I think that the only name Jerusalem says it all. And you do not come to Jerusalem, you do not visit Jerusalem like you would visit London or Paris or Roma.
Why not?
Because Jerusalem, with what it means, if you're a believer or if you're not a believer, you automatically become a pilgrim as soon as your feet step into these gates. You automatically, something happens to you that I cannot explain.
You've seen that happen over and
I
over
see it all
again.
the time. You do not leave the city the same way you came in. Something will happen to you on several different levels, but something will happen to you.
So tell me about the Jewish heart and the yearning, the longing.
Just the longing for Jerusalem, next-in Jerusalem, repeating Jerusalem. And I tell my people, my group, that you can take a Jew out of Jerusalem, but you cannot take Jerusalem out of a Jew. And every single Jew, wherever he lives in the world, whatever time it was, will have Jerusalem in the very center of his heart. The prayers, everything we will do will be Jerusalem. And suddenly you come here, after 2,000 years, you come back to the city where we were kicked out some 2,000 years ago. And you don't have to be a super believer to feel this. Something catches you in the city.
So you're saying even non-religious Jewish people feel that?
You do not leave the city indifferent. You are not the same person before and after.
While in exile in the kingdom of Babylon, an ancient Hebrew wrote a song about the longing of his heart for Jerusalem.
If I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy. Psalm 137.
Jerusalem has often been called the Eternal City, a spiritual epicenter, a land of interest to those who are seeking help from beyond themselves. Israel, a land of hills and valleys, known for the famous Lake of Galilee. She has desert regions that stretch along the Jordan River to the lowest point on earth, the Dead Sea. She has date palms, olive trees, sheep, goats, and donkeys that still wander the region. And they're not alone, for the regathered people of this land continue to tell her story. Think of the land of Israel as a great stage, a platform on which the greatest story of history is playing out. Now, the platform itself is about 300 miles long and about 70 miles wide. And on this stage, the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, are actually the cast, the players. The script? Well, we're here at the Israel Museum, and one of the most important parts of that script is housed here. It's a part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And in 1947, just at the time that the nation of Israel was emerging and becoming a nation after almost 2,000 years of being scattered without their own national sovereignty, that the Dead Sea Scrolls were found on the western rim of the Dead Sea. Thousands of fragments of scrolls. But among those scrolls was a scroll of the prophet Isaiah, a wonderful scroll. And here at the Israel Museum, that scroll is housed. It's called the Shrine of the Book. The unusual shape is actually to represent the top of a clay jar in which these scrolls were found. Interestingly, the Isaiah scroll describes the Messiah of Israel coming to center stage in this land, bringing salvation.
The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. Isaiah chapter 61.
The Dead Sea Scrolls are an amazingly preserved treasure, a treasure made up of a script that we call Scripture. These scrolls are accurate copies, practically identical to the Bible's Old Testament. And together, they describe that unfolding drama played out for the good of all nations on the stage we call Israel. Why is the nation of Israel located where it is? Why in the world would a chosen people be placed on a sliver of land at the eastern end of the Mediterranean Sea? These are important questions for a land that the Bible calls the Promised Land, positioned strategically at the crossroads of an ancient world. One of the things we've been talking about is that Israel has a story, but she not only has a story, she has a strategic position from which to communicate it to the region. In fact, before the Hebrews ever came into this land, the superpowers of this part of the world were vying for control of the very land that the God of the Bible promised to his people. Ronnie, you were telling me that before the Hebrews ever came to this land, there were struggles over its control, right?
Absolutely.
Like who? Who was struggling for it?
Whoever the big superpower were in the area.
Like who?
From the Egyptians some 5,000 years ago, to the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persian, the Greek, the Romans, whoever, all the way to Napoleon in the 19th century, and Allenby in the 19th century, First World War.
And they fought over
They
this
fought
land.
over this land, over this specific area.
And why?
Why? Because the strategic location of this very place where we stand.
And what made it so strategic?
If we look at the map, Israel was sitting on what the Roman would call the Via Maris, a super ancient highway.
The way of the sea, right?
Yes, the Via Maris, the way of the sea, or the road of the sea, connecting Asia in the north to Africa in the south, Egypt to Mesopotamia.
Okay.
And this was the main trading route back in these days, when we're talking of a time when there were no trains and no planes, no boat. People were crossing the lands to go from one place to another to trade. But this road would also be used to invade and to destroy.
Okay, so for military purposes, for commercial
strategic,
purposes.
exactly.
Okay.
And Israel of today is sitting in the very middle of this Via Maris. And the place where we are today is in the very middle of Israel. So double reason.
Okay, so from a biblical, a Bible's point of view, if God takes his people and he places them in this land,
Yeah.
it puts them in a position to have influence
Yes,
and to get the word out
absolutely.
to 3 continents.
Absolutely. We've got Africa, we've got Asia, and later Europe.
Okay, now tell us about where we're standing right
So
here.
we're standing right by the gate of the ancient city of Megiddo. These city gates are rented to King Solomon. We are going back some 3,000 years ago, and 3 cities, and again, to understand the strategy of this country, 3 cities King Solomon will fortify. One is Megiddo, at the very entrance of the Jerusalem Valley.
Again, because of its strategic value.
Because of the strategic value, there's no holy place here, nothing holy here. One will be in Gezer in the south, the entrance from the south to Jerusalem,
Gezer.
overlooking Tel
Is that
Gezer.
Gezer?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And this will be the breadbasket of Jerusalem.
Okay.
Megiddo will be the breadbasket of this area also. And further north, Tel Hatzor. A bit
Okay.
further north, which will be the entrance to Israel from the north.
Okay.
So 3 very strategic points.
Within the strategic nature of the whole land bridge between these 3 continents.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks. So when you think of a chosen people and a promised land, it's important to remember that the land of Israel was positioned at a strategic land bridge between 3 continents, between Africa, Asia, and Europe. In many ways, this was the crossroads of the ancient world. So there was a reason for Israel's strategic position at the crossroads of the ancient world. Because God had revealed to Israel how people of all nations could know him, Israel was to be a light to the nations at the crossroads of eternity.
Pay attention to me, O my people, and give ear to me, O my nation. For a law will go forth from me, and I will set my justice for a light of the peoples. Isaiah chapter 51.
Israel is small, only about the size of New Jersey. The entire country would fit nicely inside Lake Michigan. And she's bordered by Arabic-speaking nations. On the east, Jordan and Syria. On her southwest, Egypt. And Lebanon is her northern border. And then there's Iraq and Iran and the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, some of the other Muslim countries in the surrounding region. All of these countries together, these neighbor nations, help us to understand why, as the curtain of history has risen and fallen on the Jewish people, all of the nations of the world have been compelled to watch Israel in order to protect their own interests. Now, as we drove in today, I was impressed at how busy this area still is. A major east-west highway and a busy intersection right down the road. Which I was thinking, in the ancient world, Israel was at the crossroads of 3 continents. Okay, that was a long time ago. Today we have different means of transportation. We fly places today. We don't have to come through this land bridge to get where we want to go in the world. Communication has changed. The media has changed dramatically. So the question now is, how does this nation of Israel continue to be center page in our newspapers and our daily news so often? In addition to the political, economic, and religious factors that keep Israel in the news, the Bible makes it clear that Israel will continue to play an important part in the story that God is telling about himself, which is one reason none of us can afford to ignore her.
Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will fulfill the good word which I have spoken concerning the house of Israel and the house of Judah. In those days and at that time, I will cause a righteous branch of David to spring forth, and he shall execute justice and righteousness on the earth. In those days, Judah will be saved, and Jerusalem will dwell in safety. And this is the name by which she will be called: The Lord is our righteousness. Jeremiah chapter 33.
So what significance can there be to Israel's existence today? Why, after 2,000 years, would the Jewish people again have become a nation? These are the streets of modern Tel Aviv. In so many ways, it looks like any big city, any place in the world. But the story of Tel Aviv, the story of the nation of Israel is so different from any other nation. In fact, there's a memorial here. I'm told that the Hebrew text comes from Jeremiah 31, verse 4, where God talks about rebuilding his people. It's so significant because ever since the Romans destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD, the nation of Israel, the people, had no homeland of their own. As the prophets had predicted, they were scattered to the 4 corners of the earth. But in 1948, something unprecedented happened. After 2,000 years, almost 2,000 years, a nation was reborn. Many who have read about the restoration of Israel as predicted by the prophet Ezekiel believe that we have seen his words partially fulfilled when Israel became a nation again after 2,000 years.
This is what the sovereign Lord says: I will take the Israelites out of the nations where they have gone. I will gather them from all around and bring them back into their own land. I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel. Ezekiel chapter 37.
What I'd like to do is show you here at Independence Hall in Tel Aviv some of the stories, some of the memories of a people who were reborn after so many centuries. So as the British mandate came to an end, and while Israel, Tel Aviv was already under attack, a group of Israeli leaders met underground here to sign their modern Declaration of Independence. I have so many thoughts running through my mind right now. So many mixed feelings. After 2 world wars and the suffering of so many people on all sides. After a nation has been displaced for almost 2,000 years. You've got the ancient predictions of the prophets. You've got the hopes and dreams of the Jewish people. Which also has the heartfelt fears and sense of displacement by the Arab peoples who feel like they're losing an ancestral homeland that they've occupied for hundreds of years. I think that's why even people who put no stock in the Bible realize that what you have here in the Middle East is a problem that almost seems unsolvable in human terms. Why would the Jewish people be blessed with a homeland, yet left in unsolvable conflict? What eternal purpose could be part of her story? Well, according to the Bible, no other nation has as much to say to us about the love and patience and the anger of God. According to the scriptures, to know her story is to know our own. The Bible makes it clear that Israel was chosen to be a light to the nations, an object lesson that shows us what happens when God's ways are honored or ignored. So if we look at Israel's story as an object lesson of God's ways, how then can we use this to know more about our own future? What can we see from where we stand today in history? Well, one way to answer these questions is by looking behind us. As we read the New Testament, we see Jesus, a Jewish rabbi, enter Israel's stage. As we follow him, we see that what he says, what he does, brings into a focus everything that we need to see. I'm standing on Mount Arbel. It gives us a wonderful overlook of the northwest shore of the Lake of Galilee. Behind me, 2,000 years ago, Jesus and his disciples lived. He taught, they learned. He did miracles and the crowds gathered. But 2,000 years ago, we also have the dividing line, the center page of human history, before Christ and after. And not only do we have the center page of human history, but we also have, according to the New Testament, the dividing line between those who acknowledged Jesus as Israel's Messiah and those who didn't. In that sense, we can say that the history of Israel and the history of Israel's Messiah actually predicts our future. In fact, Jesus said that what we decide about him will determine our own future.
Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. John's Gospel, chapter 11.
So, what to do with Jesus was one of the great questions of first century Jerusalem. In fact, after Jesus raised a man named Lazarus from the dead, the Jewish religious leaders were in an uproar. They had to decide what they were going to do with this man who was calling all men to himself.
Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. Here is this man performing many miraculous signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up. You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish. John's Gospel, chapter 11.
One man to die for all people. And something really important just happened in this conversation. According to the text, God intervened in the words of the high priest an intelligent man who had insight into the needs of his people. And yet, God gave his words meaning that he didn't intend. You could read those words and say, did he really get it? I mean, it sounds from what Caiaphas says that he's saying what the rest of the New Testament says, that one man needs to die for all. But he meant something entirely different. He meant we have to take him out. For the sake of the people, for the sake of the nation, we have to kill Jesus, because the text goes on to say that from that time forward, they made plans to kill him.
I've thought a lot about Israel and her story. It's an unfolding drama that's still being told. According to the Bible, she gave us the Messiah, the Son of God and a Savior. But now looking forward, I realize more than ever that for all of the nations of the world, Israel remains at the crossroads of eternity.
There's another part, half of that, but I thought that we don't have any more time, and I thought you would enjoy this part more. Okay, you want to go with us?
Really makes you want to go.
Yeah. It's true what he said, Jerusalem's like a magnet. You don't know what happens to you when you're there, but something, you leave there and you're really never the same. Would somebody turn the lights on? Okay, thank you. Okay, any questions you want to ask? And I'm going to let you go about 10 minutes early. I hope all of you are here next week. We have some exciting weeks coming up in the Bible, so try not to miss. Anyone?
Now, I've got a question. The Dome of the Rock right there, okay, that was like founded on the, where the actual church was founded, wasn't it? Where the,
This is where Abraham offered Isaac. This is where
Right.
the temple stood.
Mhm.
The temple, they call it the Temple Mount.
How did the
Muslims.
Well,
take
you
it
know,
over
the
then?
Muslims almost ruled the world
Uh-huh.
in the 7th century. They took over so many things, and they took over the Holy Land.
But they believe Abraham's their father too.
Yeah, they
Because of
claim
Ishmael.
Abraham is,
Yeah.
yeah.
They know that in
Well,
600 years.
Islam has nothing to do with, they say, people in the know say that the only true seed of Abraham is Saudi Arabia. But all those Islamic countries cannot claim Abraham as their father, because there's people from Egypt and from Syria and all of these other nations, but there is a true seed of Abraham that is Islamic. But what joins them together is Islam, and then they claim Abraham as their father. No such thing. He was not the father of Islam. But that is an old building, and the only way it'll ever come down is for God to knock it down. That would cause a third world war, should somebody take it down. But God in his own time will take it down, because the temple is going to be built. The word says that they're going to build another temple, because this is where the Antichrist is going to go in and claim he's God. And so hopefully we will go on a tour. They're trying to arrange for us to go on a tour under the Temple Mount. They have a tunnel now under it. And it's hard to get reservations to go, but they're working on getting us reservations this time to go under the Temple Mount. Hopefully we can. Be an exciting experience. Thank you, Lord, for what we have seen and what we have heard tonight, and bless the word to our heart. And I just pray that we not focus so much on facts, which are important, but that we will glean out of it spiritual refreshment and things that will guide our own lives. as we read your word, I pray that you will apply it to us today, that we'll know how to live and know how to receive from you. We thank you, Lord, for the word that you preserve for us. And we thank you for the enlightenment that you give us to understand it. Now go with us to our homes. And we'll thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, don't forget.